I find it very satisfying when video game logic just makes sense. To explain what I mean, I want to talk about the intuitive design of a few different games, and the first one is the one you're looking at. This is Days Gone. Days Gone is an open-world zombie survival game, and a major aspect of the game is your motorcycle. This might be the best implementation of a motorcycle in any video game. The bike is visually very realistic with lots of complex parts and high-resolution textures. You can customize much of the bike to your aesthetic preferences. Certain parts can be changed for looks, and the paint jobs include not just different colors of paint, but different kinds of paint, ranging from matte to glossy to metallic. There are many decals to choose from, and entire unique paint jobs. The way light plays off of all these materials is very convincing. My personal favorite is the copper coating. The sound of the bike is also realistic, obviously taken from real motorcycles. Even down to that crunchy whine of the suspension coil. Because this digital object is so realistic, my brain starts to expect certain behaviors from it, and the developers deliver. Firstly, the controls are excellent. Now, I've never driven a motorcycle myself, but I know the developers of the game are motorcycle riders and enthusiasts, and it shows. The bike's weight shifts from side to side in a way you would expect. The turning radius feels right. The acceleration feels right. When I'm going off a small ramp, I can shift my weight forward and back to better angle the bike for a safer landing. I did this naturally. I intuitively wanted to lean the bike forward to match my wheels to the terrain I was landing on and engage the suspension evenly. And the game honors that intuition. Your bike has a health meter and will take a lot of damage from a big jump if you're not mindful about the landing. A good landing will also be much quieter than a bad landing. So even though you don't see the health number of the bike at the time, you can tell by the audio how damaging a landing was. Very much in the way that you might hear something while driving in real life and think, that sounded expensive. The open world is dangerous and also large, so you will be spending a lot of time on the bike, making its intuitive design not just appreciated, but necessary. Another consideration the developers made is coasting. When you're going down a hill, you might naturally release the throttle and let gravity do the work. And in this game, you can do that, and the bike will react accordingly. The engine will quiet down, which is important because loud noises will attract swarms of zombies. And you will also save gas by coasting downhill. Yes, the bike has a gas meter. That will be important later. You can drift on the bike, and you will be more or less successful depending on the terrain. Dry ground with good traction will lead to a clean, fast drift, while wet or icy ground will be more sloppy and slow. So much of the behavior that my brain expects from a physical bike is represented here, which makes me feel one with the bike, even though my hands are on a video game controller, not a throttle. This also makes me pay more attention to the world I'm driving through, because my success on this bike is accurately affected by the physics interactions with the terrain. By this I mean that I can't drive absent-mindedly. Rather, I need to relax my eyes and look out ahead of me to make better driving decisions and keep the bike in good health. You might be saying, so what? They made a good vehicle. That's not a big deal. But most video game vehicles that I have played are not nearly this thoughtfully made. Typically, they're designed to get you from point to point, and that's it. In Days Gone, the bike is an entire gameplay system on its own. It has its own physics system, its own animation system, its own audio system. It feels as alive as the main character, and what's more, the intuitive nature of this bike has ripple effects throughout the rest of the gameplay. For example, let's go back to that gas meter. Your motorcycle has a gas tank, and in the early hours of the game, it's a pretty small one. If you run out of gas, you're stuck walking. This is a dangerous situation, especially when you have few tools to defend yourself. The zombies run fast and can overwhelm you, so driving away is often the best tactic for survival. On foot, your main character has limited stamina and won't make it far if too many zombies are attracted to your location, so paying attention to your gas meter is important. Doing things like coasting down hills will save your precious gas, and eventually upgrading to a bigger gas tank will be one of your highest priorities. But how do you get more gas when you run out? Well, this leads me to the next aspect of the game's intuitive design. You see, in Days Gone, resources are scarce and you must find them out in the world. This is true of gasoline. If you run out of gas, you can actually walk your bike, but you'll have better luck getting off and hunting for gas on foot. And I think it's in desperate times like this that this game's survival aspect really shines. Because gas cans are not just randomly strewn around the open world. They are where a gas can would be, like at a gas station, or on a tow truck, or near a generator. So it benefits you to look at the environment and use your common sense when searching for gas. I actually didn't realize this at first. I would aimlessly roam for gas cans and just hope that I'd stumble upon one eventually. It wasn't until halfway through the game, when I was in sore need of a particular crafting resource, that I finally understood the intuitive nature of the open world. Because of the way zombies can swarm and easily overtake you, some weapons are more useful than others. Particularly valuable are the attractor bombs. These are explosives that first make a loud noise to attract a swarm of zombies, and importantly, explode after a timer runs out, satisfyingly destroying a whole clump of zombies all at once, while I get some breathing room. And once I started engaging with bigger groups of zombies, this weapon became an irreplaceable part of my arsenal. And I kept running out of them. Slightly frustrated, I looked at the exact ingredients needed to make these bombs and realized that my bottleneck was a specific resource. I never had any alarm clocks, which were needed for the timer on the bomb. So, while I played, I started to keep an eye out for the alarm clocks. But I still found them so rarely, and my frustration grew, because fighting groups of zombies, especially in the first half of the game, kept ending the same way. But at some point, for some reason, I finally stopped and thought to myself, okay, where would I find alarm clocks in real life? Well, typically people keep their alarm clocks in their bedrooms on their bedside tables. But there's no way it's going to be that intuitive. Video game rules don't adhere to reality like that. Typically, video game logic asks you to leave your real-world sensibilities and common sense at the door. And so that's what I've grown to expect. But I went to one of the many abandoned houses in the game, up the stairs to the bedroom. Lo and behold, there was an alarm clock. And I went to another house and another bedside table and again found an alarm clock. And it's not just the alarm clocks and the gas cans. Every collectible resource in the game will generally be found where it makes the most sense. If you want a med kit, find an ambulance. If you need styrofoam, look in the kitchens. If you want tools and wood, look in a garage or sheds. Weapon ammo. You're not going to find weapon ammo just anywhere. But find a police car and break open the trunk, you get your ammo. So many games I've played just place collectible things randomly. The developer usually wants to tune how many resources you get, but where you find them is often less designed. In Days Gone, what could have been an annoying aspect of a survival game, resource gathering, becomes fun because I know what I need, I can deduce where to get it, and enjoy the satisfaction of my intuition paying off. I also appreciate this design so much because it forces you to look at the world more thoughtfully. A diner like this ceases to be a digital place with random stuff in it, and becomes a location that people used to inhabit. And you can think about what this place was like and what people used to do here. Imagine where people might have left things, and the game rewards you accordingly. There's something kind of sad about needing bandages and finding them in the medicine cabinet of some long-lost family's bathroom. Or finding a baseball bat in the child's bedroom. Thinking about the once lively nature of these dead places is part of the tragedy of a post-apocalypse, and the game's looting system echoes that tragedy. This loot system also means that my roleplay as a survivor in this world is supported by the developer, sometimes to a surprisingly detailed extent. A small example of this is the car alarms. Engine parts are another crafting resource that you will frequently need, and you can find them, you guessed it, in cars. So I find a car and jimmy open the hood to get the parts. But some cars still have their alarms enabled, and when I pop open the hood, the alarm will sound.
Oh, shit.
This attracts the zombies in the area, which is typically the last thing I want when I'm scrounging for resources. But I could have avoided this. If, before I popped the hood, I first looked at the dashboard of the car, I would have noticed a blinking red light. Just like in real life, this indicates an armed car alarm. If I had noticed this, I would have known to avoid this car when looking for parts. That red blinking light is also helpful because the car alarm itself is a crafting resource. So if I actually want car alarms, I don't have to waste time searching every car for them, only the ones with a blinking light. So being careful and observant has benefits, as I would expect it to in a dangerous world full of zombies. This all then feeds back into the excellent motorcycle gameplay, because many of the resources you collect go into upgrading all the parts of the bike. The bike then performs better and becomes even more fun and intuitive to drive. And that ripples back again into the exploration of the locations I find on my travels. Because of this game design, I learned to trust the world more. A barrier between me and the game is broken down. I can use my intuition in their world, and it becomes a game world me and the developer share, not just one that I cognitively visit at an arm's length. Speaking of intuitive looting systems, the next game I want to talk about is Skyrim. As you probably already know, Skyrim is another open world game, but this time fantasy, with dragons and swords and magic. And it does something that I really appreciate, which is that generally speaking, when you fight and kill a humanoid enemy, you can take everything off of their body to use yourself. If you don't play many video games, you'd be surprised how often fallen enemies have incredible armor and weapons, but for some reason, all you can take from them is a few coins and maybe a helmet. But in Skyrim, if someone is coming at you with some cool-looking armor and an impressive weapon, if you kill that enemy, those objects are yours to take. And they are removed from the body. So if you want to steal somebody's whole outfit, you can leave them in their underwear. Skyrim came out in 2011 and was an extremely successful game, selling over 50 million copies. And yet, few games since have taken this approach to looting an enemy. It just makes sense to me that if a warrior has some valuable gear that I want, and I defeat them in combat, I should be able to take that gear. In fact, each non-playable character in Skyrim, not just the enemies, has their own inventory of items, and they can use those items just like you can use yours. They might have some healing potions on them, or a magical staff and a dagger, and if they die, those items remain as separate whole objects attached to their owner, unless you take them. To me, this makes each character in the world feel more of my equal. They don't get special rules applied to them. They can't suddenly spawn a huge warhammer that they didn't have before we started fighting, and that disappears upon their death. As a benefit of this system, you can pickpocket someone and see their whole inventory. And you can try to steal something, but the bigger the object, the more difficult it will be to get away with it. But in extreme cases, if you are a master pickpocket, you can steal the clothes right off someone's back without them knowing it was you.
Did I see you talking to Sven?
You can even pickpocket someone's weapons before fighting them, and they'll be forced to use their fists.
There's beauty. What do you think you're doing?
Very silly, of course, but proof that their inventory is real. The next intuitive thing about Skyrim is what happens after you loot an enemy. Whatever weapons you pick up, you have to decide what to do with them. I think a part of intuitive design is simplicity, and Skyrim does indeed keep it very simple. You've got a left hand and a right hand, and you just choose what weapon goes in what hand. This binary choice means you can have an axe in your right hand and a spell in the left, or vice versa. Or maybe you want an axe in both hands, or two different spells. There are a lot of different weapons and spells, so the combinations are deceptively numerous. Additionally, some large weapons are two-handed, so that means both hands are occupied. You can change what's in your hands at any time, but at any one moment, you will never have access to more than you can fit in your two hands. I think this system gives a good balance of freedom and limitation, and also is visually intuitive. I'm never left trying to remember what abilities I have because my hands tell me the answer. Despite the simplicity, there is some depth too. There are different defensive stances depending on whether you have a shield equipped or not. There are new attacks that you can only do when dual-wielding physical weapons. If you want to do a basic attack, you tap the corresponding trigger, and if you want to do a more powerful heavy attack, you hold the trigger. To me, it feels analog, and the hands on screen become an extension of the hands on the controller. I particularly like that you can have any spell in any hand, but if you have the same spell in both, you can combine the spells for a greater effect. This little mechanic makes my character feel like they've got an extra trick up their sleeve, the way a fantasy magician should. I played Skyrim back in 2011 when it was released, and ever since I've been waiting for more games to adopt this system, and I'm still waiting. It works so well to me because it's a simple premise, put stuff in your hands, that becomes complex when you start adding up and combining simple parts. And the things you put in your hands matters because of the way Skyrim handles leveling up. I love the leveling system in this game, and am again surprised that more games don't adopt it. In most other games that I play, to gain new abilities you first complete a mission, and after the mission is done, you'll receive a lump sum of experience points. Eventually, your character will go from being level 2 to level 3, and upon that level up, you receive a skill point which you can use to unlock new abilities. This system isn't all bad, I just prefer Skyrim's system much more. In Skyrim, if you want to get better at magic, you simply start using magic. If you want to block more damage with your shield, put a shield in your hand and start using it. In real life, you don't gain experience in a lump sum after completing a challenge. The challenge itself gives you the experience. If you want to learn a new skill, start doing it poorly. and eventually, with perseverance, you will start to do it less poorly. And if you stick with it, you might eventually be good at it, or even great. But you have to start doing it. This is true in Skyrim. If you want to learn new tricks with a bow, using a bow will eventually give you bow experience, and your skill level with a bow will increase. The consequences of this system is that your character's strengths and talents emanate from your playstyle, not some abstract distribution of experience points. And if you want your character's talents to be different, then you have to play differently. I think there's a life lesson there. Your character's skill progression is connected to the last point I want to make about Skyrim, and that is the intuitive user interface. After I've been consistently using, let's say, destruction magic, like fire, ice, and lightning spells, and my destruction magic level has grown, I gain access to new relevant abilities. In other games, this is often a boring menu, almost like a web page. In contrast, I am delighted by the way Skyrim visualizes the upgrade menu. You pause the game and literally push the control stick upwards to look up to the heavens, and you are met with a starry sky full of nebulas and constellations. Each constellation represents a different skill, and the stars therein are the abilities you unlock. I find this menu beautiful in multiple ways. For one, the colors and symbols are a joy to look at no matter how many times I visit this menu. For another, the idea of my character looking up to find their stars and meditate on who they want to be is very sweet to me. If you push the stick downwards to look at your feet, you open the world map, which I think is also an intuitive touch. Look up to see the stars above you, look down to see the path ahead of you. And this map is maybe my favorite world map of any game. It's not a painting or a stylized version of the world, it is the actual region, just zoomed way out. You don't have to mentally translate what the map is trying to convey. What you see is what you get. I think Skyrim does this because it wants to immerse you in this world and keep the fantasy alive even after you've pressed the pause button. And I'd say they succeeded. The final game I want to talk about is Infamous Second Son. It's an open world set in the American city of Seattle, and you play as a punk with superpowers named Delsin. Now, I don't love this game. I was very excited for it before it came out, which was in 2014, by the way, and I was disappointed with it for many reasons. But it does have some redeeming qualities, namely that despite its many flaws, it remains one of the best implementations of superpowers in a game. Powers work differently in the Infamous universe. Instead of nondescript energy blasts that you might get from other games, powers in this world come from specific sources. Your character has the ability to absorb and emit smoke. He can also disapparate into smoke. But importantly, abilities in this world are not created out of thin air. They have to be taken from an existing source. And so for our main character, that means in order to spit smoke from his hands, he has to find and absorb smoke from out in the world. This leads to an interesting dynamic. Architecture in the open world city that would typically be set dressing, like air vents and chimneys, become an integral part of gameplay. If you want to get up to the rooftops quickly, look for an air vent and whip yourself into smoke to be hurled out of the top end. Look at this animation. I love the way Delsin maintains his toroidal momentum as he emerges from the vent, reconstituting himself from smoke. The audio is great too, a raspy sigh of exhilaration. And the speed at which you rush through those vents is so satisfying. It's the fastest way to get vertical in the game. You can also smoke dash into the rooftop vents to huff into the sky for even more distance. Shooting and throwing smoke while fighting enemies will deplete your reserves, and you will need to find chimneys to absorb from. Absorbing smoke gives you ammunition and heals you as well. The system is simple. If you need smoke, find smoke. The simplicity becomes more valuable as you unlock more powers throughout the story. Delsin acquires neon powers, and suddenly all those neon signs you've been running past have a clear purpose. Halfway through the game, Delsin also gets video powers. And even though video is a strange superpower, now that you know how the game works, you can probably guess where you would absorb that. However, the video power has some frustrating oversights, like way too few video screens in the world, and some of the video screens that should obviously be absorbable just aren't. I strongly suspect the video power was a later addition in the game's development, because it just isn't given nearly as much consideration as your first two powers. But even with its flaws, I think this visual language is a large benefit to the gameplay, especially when in the heat of battle. Not having to contend with the controls, or menus, or potions during hectic moments, instead having to relax and observe the world to get your health back and replenish your powers. You also can't hot swap between your powers. In order to go from your neon ability set to the smoke, you need to go absorb smoke. And that can make things interesting when you consider that smoke isn't just something you can find in the world, but something you can create. Are you equipped with neon in a battle and would prefer smoke? Use your neon blasts to destroy an enemy vehicle and make your own smoke source. I wish the game went even further with this concept, because being able to make your own power sources like this creates a rhythm between your superpowers that elevates all of them. This power system tightly connects the main character to the open world. His survival and traversal depend on the architecture around him. And as a player, it means I don't have to learn some strange gameplay rules or fumble with controls to enjoy the superpowers. Rather, that visual language of the open world tells me all I need to know at first glance. And I can focus on what I want to do with my powers, not how to do it. If I want to get around faster with video powers, find some video screens. If I want to switch to my neon powers, a glowing sign is never too far away. The resources, like smoking chimneys, neon signs, and video screens, are finite. A real neon sign is hermetically sealed, so it makes sense that when you take the neon gas out of it, the sign darkens. The TV screens also darken when you take the video signal from them. These are small details, but to me they demonstrate how something cannot come from nothing in this world. Delsin is transferring a discrete supply of material into himself, exhausting its source, not just tapping into an infinite well of ammo. This makes the powers feel more tangible and consequential. Some of the behaviors that I expect from these materials are also respected, especially with the smoke, like heat sources giving you lift, and being able to dash through fences. My desires for superpowers in video games include having many different abilities that feel powerful, but also strengthen my connection to the world I'm playing in. I think using intuitive game design, Infamous Second Son achieves that. Not everything about these games is intuitive, but the parts that are provide an important game design lesson for me. If you respect the player's common sense, they will respect your game more. Also, the examples I used are intuitive to me, but might not have been to you. We all have different intuitions, of course. So feel free to share some of your favorite examples of intuitive game design. And thanks for watching.